The problems that students run into with the comps, they want to try to say too much, you know. And I try to push this on the reflections too. I've had reflections that were maybe 6 or 8 sentences long that were like, you know, 3 almost level stuff, because they just get it, they get the words in place, they do the analysis, and it's all there. You know, it doesn't have to be pages long. You know, I used to get angry at this at Temple when I went to Temple University, and we had a weekly writing assignment on a question. He would give us a question. And one day I really got into the hermeneutics thing, you know, because I was interested in that, and it was a question about hermeneutics. So I did my thing in like 8-point type, and it was only allowed to be on one side of one page. So I made the margins small, and I filled up the whole page, you know, with this thing. And I researched it, and I did all this stuff. You know, I got like a 1.8 on it, you know, out of the 3, you know. And I was looking at other people, and they had like 2 paragraphs of 12-point type, and they're getting 2.8s and 3s, and I'm like, you know, so I said, what's the, you know, he says, I don't want the whole, I want a clear point of understanding that shows you understood. You just repeated back to me a bunch of stuff. I want to see that you understood something. So I was like, all right, you know.
I think it would be beneficial to actually see one of those.
See one of those.
Just to see what it is that we
Yeah, I hate to give them out though, you know, because
I asked them again this semester.
I know, I don't like to do it because they're students' work, and there's 100 different ways to do it, a good one, you know.
Yeah, I know, but just to see how somebody...
That it exists.
just to, so I could see how they're thinking and how I could possibly, you know, rethink.
You know, just go to, I tell you what, go to Little John when you take a theory, find 4, 5, 6 things about it, you know, Watzlawik's 5 axioms of interaction. Here, I'll do this example now. Let's do this example. This will work. So one of the things that, as we've gone through comm theory, and other classes have gone through comm theory, students will sometimes write me a reflection that says, what we did this week in Watzlawik's interaction analysis. So this was kind of a cybernetic approach, one of the cybernetic theories. Because he has this whole discussion of complementarity or symmetry in communication exchanges. So I'm not sure what page it's on in Little John, but it runs something like this, that you can have an exchange, and he uses the one up, one down symbols. You can have an exchange where somebody says to you, where were you? And you say, I was at the school library. So in Watzlawik's version of analysis of communication, that's a one up and a one down. You were asked a question, the person took control of the direction of the conversation, and you fit into it. You acted complementarily to that. They asked you a question, you gave an answer. And so, and this sequence of conversation might continue like this. Well, yeah. Well, see, that would be different then. So if I say, where were you? I was in the library. Oh, what did you see there? Oh, I looked up some references from my paper. Oh, did you find any? No, you know. So this is a complementary thing. And you can punctuate this however you want. So you can start there, or you can start there in telling the story of this conversation, explaining it to somebody. So, so let me give some more. But students have discovered that a lot of times they feel like these exchanges make them feel powerless, and that someone else is in charge of what's going on. So when they see this theory, they start to think about what Watzlawick calls symmetrical patterns of communication, where someone says, well, where were you? And you say, well, why is that important? So you have now made a choice about your communicative response, that you are not going to be in a complementary relationship. You're going to challenge who's in control of this conversation. And so students have found this to be really useful for them, because they can think of example after example with roommates, with partners.
Exactly what I want to say. This is exactly what my roommate does. Where are you going? Are you going now? Well, yeah. Are you going by yourself? Well, why do you want to know? This is exactly the conversation that we have. I find it very intrusive.
Yes, yeah.
She's very intrusive. Why do you want to know?
Right.
And then she becomes defensive. Well, I was just asking. Can I ask? The exact conversation that we have, I think, like 4 times a week. Why do you want to know?
You
What
can
to
ask,
do?
right?
Yeah, now see, Watzlawick gives you a way to make sense of this. See, so a cybernetic tradition, interaction, interactional view by Watzlawick gives you a way to start making sense of this. He also helps you make sense of the pattern of relationships where you have the pursue withdrawal sequence. So this is commonly, somebody says, we need to talk. I don't think our relationship is in good shape. I'm worried about where we're going. I want to get this straight. And the other person says, oh, I don't understand what you're about. Everything's fine. And so they withdraw. And then they withdraw, so you pursue more, right? So, and they withdraw more, so you pursue more, and they withdraw. So if you talk to the person, let's take person A, you say to person A, why are you pursuing so much? Why are you being so intense? Why are you? And they would say, because they withdrew. So they punctuate the linear as saying, they started it, and I'm just responding to it. If you ask B, why are you withdrawing? They will say, I withdraw because they're just so intense. And so they would punctuate it as starting at another place. So
I actually went through that with my boyfriend, and now we're not together.
I was going to say, that's
you
marriage.
spun out of control.
That's bread.
You went,
Sorry, what it is. The moment the
Predator
predator,
and prey.
well, the moment the predator senses fear and withdrawal, they pursue more. And the more the prey is pursued, the more it runs.
yeah. Well, I'm sorry about that. And maybe it was good. I don't know. Is it okay? Okay.
I don't know, I feel like the person withdrawing would have a lot more power, in a sense, because, they're pursuing and they keep on trying to get an answer, but they're like, oh, well, it's fine, whatever, who cares? And they're the ones controlling what is the subject of the matter.
Yeah, well, sure. But it's what Watzlawick points out is he's illustrating the question of punctuation, that all our communication is a continuous stream. That started when we were born and has just continued. So depending on where you start thinking about something, it changes the way, who started this. But it probably grew at some point, and then it just came out. So now this person is blaming this one for the cycle, and this one's blaming this one for the cycle. So Watzlawick would want to say, look, you're caught up in this punctuation problem. I have a theory of communication that explains this in terms of how you punctuate your relationship. And I would suggest to you that you will not get anywhere until you agree on the punctuation. And you may want to just forget about the punctuation and enter a new conversation about what kind of relationship do we want to have. So let's cut that off and let's punctuate a new conversation.
Or like she was saying earlier with the barbecue sauce, if you change the cycle, because usually it's you say, this person says that,
Right.
why are you defensive? Why am I at? But if you throw something completely else out there, then it would start.
It could conceivably change a different pattern. Yeah, that's an expectancy violation. There's another communication theory about expectancy violations, and it says that there are certain conditions under which expectancy violations will have a positive effect, and there are certain conditions under which they will have a negative effect. And there's been research done to determine what are the conditions that if you realize these conditions are present, then you can take a risk with an expectancy violation. So see, comm theory has a lot of stuff to offer in different places. But to go back to this example then for Joe, you're talking about, well, what makes a great reflection? So when you see this, so students will write me, they say, wow, after we did that lecture on Watzlawick and, complementary versus symmetrical exchanges, I really realized that with my roommate, I was falling into this thing, and so I went back and I stood up for myself and I said, I'm not going to answer that, or that's not important to you. And all of a sudden it changed the whole relationship. So this is an example where, now that's a reflection that gets a 2. A reflection that gets a 3 goes back to Watzlawick and says, all right, Watzlawick says there are 5 axioms of communication. So since his theory is useful for me, I'm going to look at each of the axioms he talks about and see where each of those axioms comes into play. So one of his axioms is that every message communicates both content and relationship. So while my roommate's question is a simple question, it indicates a relationship that I don't want to have with that person, of being, subject to their inquisition. So Watzlawick helps me to see that it's not only the symmetry issues that I'm dealing with, but it's a relationship issue as well. Now you're moving, up, because you're taking the grid of the theory and you're applying it more fully to the situation. So you had to go back to the text or to Wikipedia or don't say that. But, somewhere that spells it out and look at the language, look at the points and start to just do them. Get your Griffin book out or go back. Little John does this. He'll say there are 5 things, there are 3 things, there are 2 things. Well, find those 2 and work them in. And at that point, I sit back and I say, all right, this student has taken a theory and has not just, basted the problem with it, just painted it on. A little Thanksgiving reference here, and just sprayed it on there and said, oh, it's a semiotic problem, but they've gone into it and they've taken the stuff and thought about it for a while and tried to take it apart on the basis of that theory. That's what makes it stronger. So when I see the language up here, I see, okay, they've got Watzlawick's 4 or 5 axioms of communication. They've thought about how they apply, and they've made some insightful observations about their communication practice. And it gets even better yet if you can make some criticism. You say, well, I think Watzlawick fails, however, to take into account this. Then that's like a...
Wouldn't that take longer than 2 paragraphs?
Not necessarily, no.
I just don't see how...
You can trim that down real quick. Tight. What's that? Huh? No. You can... it's an outline. It says, you can even do these in outline form. I mean, you don't have to be prose. Problem, this, theory, this. You have 4 points, 1, 2, 3, 4. It shows me this, 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 and this. Closing criticism, Watzlawick fails to take into account this. Done. Sorry. I got to get some good examples. I will get some good examples, Joe, for future semesters, I guess. But I don't want people to use them as a form then. I
know personally I don't use it as a form. I just use it to see how other people did it so I could be more reflective on how I could change my style.
But this is the point. This is a 2. At that point, this is a 3. Okay.
Use that.
Yeah, use that. But anyway, what I wanted to do with us tonight with this example was just to show you again how comm theory connects with the cases. You know, Craig makes the point early on in the article that all communication theory ultimately arises out of things we're dealing with in communication. And it becomes a way of thinking deeply about problems we face. So this is a problem when people feel like they are always in a one down situation. I mean, it's you can have a symmetrical down relationship. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. Where do you want to go? I don't care. Where do you want to go? I don't know. You know, well, everyone's trying to give control of the conversation to someone else who will say, well, let's go do this. Okay. You know, you're waiting for someone to break the cycle and do this.
That's really interesting. But often in that case, let's see, if you say what do you want to do to the other person, they actually have a very clear agenda in their minds of what they want to do, and they get actively angry if it doesn't play out the way they want. So is there a way to show that? You said that it represents both message and
well, if you're doing Watzlawick, he has axioms. You cannot not communicate. Every message carries content and relationship information. Relationship messages are complementary or symmetrical or transitional. And I think there's one more or two more. Yeah. So you just start to use his grid, his theory, to see if it will explain it.
Right.
And it may not.
Right.
I mean, for me, CMM is kind of a multi-tool, you know, that you can kind of get at things. Once you look at the messages and the episode and the culture and the relationship, that begins to explain what's going on. But Watzlawick is great about, you know, he's the one who was in the Palo Alto Research Center, was doing counseling with veterans and doing the schizophrenia work, and found that if you treat families, people get better than just treating individuals. So he looked at family systems a lot. And that's Bowen. That gets into my favorite authors, Bowen and all that stuff. So this is just to do some integration of theory and practices from some reflections that we've had. All right, Susan. Let me... here's another example just from a student, another class. It did a reflection on this problem. That she would always she'd be at work, and she'd get a phone call from her mother saying, as soon as you get off from work, you got to come home and take care of your chores. You come home and do your chores. And she would just blah, 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 okay, yeah, and not go. And so then there would be a follow-up phone call yelling, and so they would yell at each other about, well, I'm doing this, and no, you should be home. And this went on day after day after day after day. So is there a communication theory that talks about repetitive patterns of unwanted communication?
Should it be in cybernetics?
Yeah, it's in cybernetics, and again, this is what Barnett Pierce calls unwanted repetitive patterns of communication. So she, in her reflection, identified this. This goes over and over again, and for some reason we allow it to repeat over and over again. Now Barnett Pierce says, if you want to do something different then, which is not unlike Carl Weick's theory of organization. Carl Weick had the theory of organization that was kind of cybernetic, that said, don't just sit around and think about what to do and plan. Act, and then see what you get, and then revise your plan. So Carl Weick had the organizational theory that said, ready, fire, aim. It said ready, aim, fire. So don't create your master strategic plans and then implement them. Try something, see what happens, then make your adjustments, then try. It's very much a systems learning approach. Try something, see if it's getting where you want to go. If it's not, get feedback, change it, but just keep check. Don't say, all right, our 5-year plan is we're going to do this, and this, because as you progress, there may be feedback that says that's not going to work. So she said, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change our communication pattern. So she simply, and this was a reflection, she simply said, what I did was I did my chores before I left for work. That sounds silly, right? But and all of a sudden this whole thing just disappeared. And their communication could go on a different basis now and could be a positive communication pattern because she chose to take an action that would change the pattern. Now that was a nice little reflection. It showed that she had reflected on a communication experience, that she saw a theoretical base to it, that there was an established pattern that for some reason they kept repeating, it served some purpose for them. And then she decided to take a new action, which from speech act theory wasn't necessarily a vocal action, but it was a communication. Right? Watzlawick says you cannot not communicate. So by doing it, you said, I want to change this. I don't want this to go on. And it changed it. So that was a very clean reflection. You know, it wasn't a 3-level reflection, but it was a clean reflection that showed application and insight into how communication could change, transform. Communication theory could transform a communication problem.
Does that also say that you can change yourself, but you can't change somebody else? I mean, are we seeing an example like the mother could have just started hassling her to do her chores in the morning, and it just would have been a different argument.
Yeah.
But what I'm seeing is also that you can look at your own options about your own behavior.
Yeah.
And
right, that's an insight often in a lot of systems thing is that the change, like the story I told you, I mean, we were talking in between, you all weren't around, about a case that Watzlawick tells in Pragmatics of Human Communication in his book, where he was working with a woman who was being sexually harassed at work. And she didn't, for her own reasons, she didn't want to go through the HR route of filing the complaint and all that stuff because she was afraid it would affect her job, career advancement. So they were talking about what to do, and Watzlawick said, well, what would happen if you said to him, next time he did anything or said anything that you didn't like, you said in front of everybody who was there, I don't like what you just did. I want you to stop it, and I don't want you to ever do that again to me. And she said, I couldn't do that. I just can't, I couldn't do that. And Watzlawick said, well, why not? So they went on for a couple of weeks, and finally she said, I could do that. I think I could do that. So he said, okay, well, do it. So she got herself to the place where she was fully prepared to communicate in that way next time something happened. And Watzlawick tells the story that the guy changed his behavior, and she never had to do that. So what changed? Well, Watzlawick says what changed was her presence in the system. That she was present in a different way, and it communicated. And so her readiness, she was fully ready to do that, and it was somehow clear. She never said it, but it was clear. So when you change your presence in the system, things rearrange. That would be Watzlawick's observation about that.
Could it have also been that somebody told the guy something and then he just happened?
I don't know. That's not the way Watzlawick tells the story, so I don't know. This gets into the whole issue of field theory. We'll do, if you take the special topics course, we're going to look a little bit at field theory, Kurt Lewin and others, who argue that we create communication relational fields in organizations and groups that affect the system that's going on. And that this is the emotional intelligence literature, talks a lot about this. And Kurt Lewin, like I said, developed field theory. Robert Bale's interaction analysis is built around field theories. And so these things affect people without them being aware of it. And some people can have a huge influence on reshaping the fields by the way they are present. We're going to talk about presencing as an organizational innovation change tool. Otto Scharmer, Society for Organizational Learning. So we're going to build, we're going to build on top of what we did last time. But we'll spend 2 or 3 weeks catching all that up for people who are fresh into it. So anyway, so yeah, you answer your question is so that you can only change yourself. Yeah, a lot of our theory is built around the idea that what you're changing is your pattern of interaction with others, which has effects and consequences.
Speaking of which, I hope this isn't too off topic, but how big of an issue is, I don't know if there's any studies on presence on like an interview or something like that? Have there been anything done? Just
You mean the way you are present?
Someone just carries themselves, they walk in the room.
I'm not familiar with it. I would not doubt that it exists.
There was a thing on the news about like what colors you wear in an interview. Like I don't know how like scientific it was, but it was on maybe about a year ago, and it was like gray and like different ties and like how different like colors you wear, like what people think about it and stuff like that.
Field theory would be more about what's going on in the way you conceive of yourself, the way you conceive of your efficacy, the emotional. There's a whole study of emotional communication. I mean, that's another field we haven't even gone into here. But Daniel Goleman, I can't come up with the other names now. I haven't looked at this in a while. But there's the whole group of people and they've done brain scans, and tested this with people who are like Buddhist practitioners of meditation who get into a certain presence or state, and they've done studies of people in the same room with other people who get into a certain state, and it replicates through the system. Yeah, there's a lot of study about this. And a lot of systems theory is built around the idea that when you shift your behavior, that has a ripple effect that shifts this behavior, that affects this behavior, that affects this behavior, and suddenly something changes over here indirectly because you're connected into this web of stuff.
Is that like that mass chaos, like the butterfly?
There's a little bit of chaos theory in it. There's the strange attractor concept, and that chaotic systems have structure and are self-organizing, which is called autopoietic. That they find a structure that works for a purpose. Yeah, which is a lot of biological and Bertalanffy and Bateson and all that stuff.
There's a manifestation of this in theater, and it can happen when you're really lucky, like 1 in 100 times that you haven't seen. but it is rare. But there are times when it's like playing tennis with somebody that's a little bit better than you. They raise their game. There's people that you're on stage with, and
the whole thing just
blows wide open, and suddenly you're doing completely unexpected things that work way better than you ever would have imagined it.
Yeah, they call that flow. There are studies done of this, or you call it about being in the zone or whatever, but flow is one of the ways it gets described in our literature, and how systems can, high functioning teams, synergy, they create flow, and everyone's performing well, and everyone's feels competent and encouraged and vital and creative, and it's moving along. Yeah, they do studies of this. How do you, because everyone would like to create that.
And once you're aware of it, it goes away. That's the part. Like you go, we're in the.
Hey. Oh. All right. So that was a little diversion, rabbit trail discussion. So, but anyway, this is all part of our comm theory integration that we're doing. How long is your presentation, Lisa? 10?
It's like 15 minutes.
15 minutes?